So we were at the topic of unity of scientific method. That is, we were seeing that discovery is not the same as justification. So if we see the example of neoclassical economics, people often say that economics is unrealistic. Why? Because economics uses elegant deductive models. Now, even if the neoclassical economics is deficient, it is not that the problem is in the context of discovery. It is not, the problem is not because economists deduce theory from the assumptions. The real question should be about justification. Has it been tested? Does whatever you say in economics, does it depict the real world? The main methodological claim is that there is no single logic of discovery, that there is no guaranteed set of procedures that yields theories, but in fact, there is a single logic of justification which is shared across the sciences. Therefore, the MSM, that is the multi scientific method, uh, that that wins on discovery diversity, but it loses because scientific method is about justification. So Verstehen or empathy also fits here. That is, empathy can help us discover. That is, empathy can help us in hypothesis generation, but truth is judged in justification. That is, there needs to be an objective evidence. So the thing is, marketing scope is broad, right? The 8 cells we have seen. So the topic is marketing a science or not? So if marketing is only profit micronormative, marketing cannot be a science, because sciences involve explanation, prediction, and understanding. And a discipline which is purely evaluative or purely prescriptive is not a science. So if we define marketing as merely as what managers should do, then in that case marketing is just like engineering or medicine. That is, it is valuable, but it is not science in the strictest sense. And if marketing includes the positive dimensions, then it can be a science, right? So if the positive ones in each sector, for example in micro macro, if we take the positive dimensions, then marketing has phenomena which can be explained or predicted or understood. Now, the what are the 4 science characteristics which we have seen in the first video? That is, a science should have a distinct subject matter. It should have a description or classification. It should have some presupposition of regularities or causal structures, and it should adopt the scientific method, that it should have some commitment to evidence. Now, the positive dimensions of marketing do have a distinct subject matter. The literature is also full of description or classifications, and there are some regularities or structures. So we can say that and also marketing researchers are, at least as committed to scientific method as the other other discipline people are. So therefore, if there is a marketing science, it is the study of marketing's positive dimensions. Okay. Now a thing about this three dichotomies model. This model has attracted strong interest and also has garnered some controversy. And the main issue is about positive versus whether this is positive or normative. Now we see one of the philosophical foundation, that is Hume's is or out gap. So Hume, the philosopher Hume, of course, he had observed that statements containing what is are logically different from the statements about what ought to be, and we cannot logically derive an ought conclusion from an is premise. So and Keynes also had talked about positive versus normative science distinction. Positive science is the knowledge about what is, and normative science is the criteria about what ought to be. So then Hunt cites philosophy references that treat the is ought fallacy as one of the major philosophical fallacies, and that is linked to the naturalistic fallacy. That is Uh, that is deriving ethical statements from the non-ethical ones. Now, why this is important for marketing? Because marketing is full of debates like, do the poor pay more? Now, this is a positive statement, do the poor pay more. But is it wrong if they pay more? Is it wrong if the poor pay more? Is a normative statement. And, there is a constant slide between these two statements. So, dichotomy is a clear thinking tool. The dichotomy is not perfect, but it is essential. Now, uh, uh, there are some allegations or charges against this, that it's false, dangerous, unnecessary, useless, meaningless. And in fact, some people do claim that all the marketing thought essentially is normative, and Hunt rebuts them. Hunt says the first allegation is it's false because we can't escape values. Okay, the critics say that since we can't be value free, so positive normative, the dichotomy is false. To this, Hunt replies that it is true that marketing research can't be perfectly value free, but that does not make the distinction false. So if we reject the distinction, that would be capitulating to despair and committing the philosophy, the fallacy of high redefinition. So basically, it is, if that would be tantamount to defining the positive as requiring impossible level of purity and then declaring it impossible. So we have a journalism analogy here, that journalism strives to separate news from opinion. It is impossible to do it perfectly, but it is still a crucial ethical ideal, right? So, but if journalism abandons objectivity entirely because perfection is unattainable, then the credibility collapses. It is the same with marketing analysis. So, Hunt's stance is very pragmatic, and it is that val- value free is unattainable, but we should still go for value disciplined separation. Okay. Now, the second allegation is that it is dangerous because it downgrades normative marketing. Okay. This is the second allegation. Uh, so, Hunt says that it is wrong reading, because nowhere in the model do we say that micronormative is unimportant. We only put it in its place as one part of the discipline. Now, historically, marketing already has overemphasized micronormating, right? When we say that marketing is an applied science, it is only for the managers. So, the bigger danger, in fact, lies in getting trapped there. So, any risk of downgrading is outweighed by the advantage of showing marketing's full scope. Okay. Then Robin argues that we can do scientific explanation in marketing if we just treat normative statements as antecedent condition. This is a very technical part over here. The argument of Robin, that if we just treat normative statements as antecedent conditions, we can do scientific explanations in marketing. For example, an explanation with, let's say, we have four antecedent conditions, C1 to C4. We have two laws, L1 and L2, and so therefore, it's there in the text that therefore the first firm must organize marketing mix to satisfy buyers. Now, what is C1? So C1 is long run profit maximization is the primary objective, right? Now, to this, Hunt says that first of all, Robin claims that this statement C1 is normative, right? Long run profit maximization is the primary objective. To this, Hunt says that C1, this statement, is not normative, it's positive, right? Why does he say that? Because C1 does not say, it does not have the word should, right? It does not say firm should maximize long run profit. It says profit maximization is the primary objective of organization. Now, that is a descriptive claim about what the organization's objective actually is. Even if the objective itself is value laden, it can be possible that the statement reporting it is positive. That essentially is Hunt's key methodological point, that we can describe someone's goal in a positive manner, but we might not endorse those goals. That would be going to the normative side. So Hunt says that Robin is mixing two things. He's mixing the organizational internal objective, which is a value or goal, with or versus the analyst's statement about that objective. And this confusion is exactly why the positive normative dichotomy remains useful. Now, Robin argued that we can do scientific explanation by using normative statements as antecedent conditions, right? So the positive normative split is unnecessarily. So, but Hunt says that there were no normative statements here at all, okay? Because, it is not that long run profit maximization should is there, or it's ought to be primary objective. It is the primary objective. Long run profit maximization is the primary objective. That is a descriptive report of an organization goal. It is not an endorsement of the goal. Okay. So ought cannot function as an antecedent in a valid scientific explanation. This is a very Hempel style point, that in scientific explanation, the explainendum must be logically derivable from the explainance. But if we insert an ought statement as an antecedent, it is impossible to do a valid deductive derivation in the way scientific explanation requires. Under this is of course under the deductive nomological idea. So the solution of Robin fails here. And Robin also concedes that Hunt is right, okay, that C1 is positive and there are no normative statements in the explanation. So Robin's attempt to show the dichotomy is unnecessary, and that becomes evidence that the dichotomy is necessary, okay, because explanations do require positive premises. Then Robin further claims that positive studies are of little interest unless they have prescriptive implications. Now, this is a very bold claim to which Hunt beautifully counter argues. He says that when you say it should be meaningful, the question is it should be meaningful to whom? So, who is the audience here? Only the marketing managers? Are they the only audience? If yes, that is exactly the narrow marketing equal to just the positive micro normative dimension that already had created trouble earlier. Now, many positive studies, in fact, do have managerial implications. Okay, and it is many of the positive explanations or predictions, they often become inputs into the normative decision rules or models. But he, rejects the universal claim that all positive work is meaningless unless it helps a manager directly, okay, or immediately. Marketing knowledge purpose or scope is wider than this. It serves multiple constituencies, multiple stakeholders, not only managers. It also serves the students, academics, policy members, special interest groups, and consumers. Okay, and uh, uh, there is a prime directive for scholarly research as well, that we should seek intersubjectively certifiable knowledge that can describe or explain or predict phenomena. And sometimes it is possible that it might help managers, sometimes it might help legislators, sometimes public understanding might be increased, sometimes simply it would advance knowledge. So the dichotomy is not meaningless. It protects the idea that even the knowledge for the sake of knowledge for understanding is a legitimate end. Okay. Then further, we have an argument by Robin and Edgar that because positive and normative are inseparable, classification will be confusing or useless. Now, to this, Edgar further says that a good taxonomy should be self-exclusive because each phenomena fits only one category. To this, Hunt replies in two layers. Hunt says that we don't need perfect self-exclusivity for a taxonomy to be useful. Many studies are overwhelmingly positive. For instance, the descriptive channel analysis, or they are overwhelmingly normative. For example, the studies pertaining to the optimal media allocation models. Even if some cases mix, a taxonomy can still work if most of the cases are classifiable with a clarity which is of a reasonable level. Okay, reasonable clarity. The second point is, even if non-exclusivity exists, it is not fatal. So let's take, he gives the teaching research service analogy. So these categories overlap massively. Research spills into teaching, teaching affects the service, yet universities use the schema because it is useful for many purposes, for thinking and evaluation. Economics is also mentioned here, that positive and normative economics influence each other, but still economics maintain the distinction. Okay, so uh, so intermingling doesn't mean that the this sort of dichotomy is useless. In fact, the interplay can be synergistic and productive. Now, HST. So HST have even a more radical claim. HST say that uh, all almost all marketing is normative. Now, what is the HST rule for normative? So HST, there were three marketing scientists. They propose that a sentence is normative if and only if it offers a reason for action. Okay, so they use this criteria and they conclude that almost all marketing phenomena, issues, theories, actions are normative, because marketing language is full of terms like ownership, rights, obligations, values, needs, exchange, power, conflict, price. Now, this would then imply a disaster. HST, they say that most of the empirical marketing studies are built on the empirical untestable positions, and marketing must start afresh. They must start anew. Now, Hunt's move here is Hunt says that if HST are right, then economics, which is full of price and exchange, political science, which is full of terms like power and conflict, sociology, anthropology, they should also start anew. So, are HST claiming that they have found an Achilles heel for all of the social sciences? So, this, then Hunt says no, there is something wrong with this line of thought which HST are advancing. Okay, so what is the counter argument here by Hunt? So Hunt picks a very good statement. So Hunt, writes that take a statement. Mary Smith now owns one box of 10 Hostess Twinkies after exchanging $5 with her local Safeway supermarket. To this, Hunt says about this statement that any normal researcher would classify this statement as positive because this statement reports what happened. That is, purchase happened, there was price involved, it happened at the store, and it does not evaluate or morally judge or prescribe anything. But still, HST would call it normative because it contains terms like ownership, exchange, price, which they claim are very normative. So Hunt asks, how could HST end up with such an idiosyncratic view? So HST's logic for claiming that ownership is normative is that ownership exists only inside a normative web of obligations, rights, or laws, and mere thus, because you have ownership, so mere ownership is a reason for acting a certain way of not stealing. So to this, Hunt gives a very sharp rebuttal. Hunt says that that the fact that Mary owns Twinkies is not by itself a reason for action, because a thief can know that Mary owns Twinkies and still the thief can steal them. Ownership only becomes a reason for action when you can conjoin it with a value premise, like you say that it is wrong to steal. That would be normative. So that value promissive that stealing is wrong is the normative statement. The ownership statement still is positive. Okay, and the second rebuttal is that if we go by the HST criterion, it makes almost any positive statement normative. So, Hunt points out that HST themselves treat this statement that by tonight it ought to be snowing in Chicago as positive in some context. But to this statement, if you add "I hate flying when it snows," so it becomes a reason for action. So, by the logic of HST, that statement also becomes normative, right? So, this makes the criterion explode. Any statement can just become a reason for action for someone and therefore violate the positivity criterion. So, their test does not reliably distinguish normative from positive. And then HST violate their own context matters inside. So HST they in fact correctly note that ought or should can be positive or normative depending on context. So they should apply the same insight to the words like own or exchange or price. these terms do not automatically make a statement normative. Okay. And so, according to Hunt, HST's confusion is in part due to the inconsistent context reasoning employed by them, and also because they use very highly suspect ontology. So, what is HST's implied ontology then? So, HST treats something as positive only if it is physically detectable or measurable. So, according to them, ownership can't be positive because it can't be measured by any tool. And they say that the concepts which can't be physically detected are normative. So, for HST, twinkles exist because it is a physical object, of course. Mary also exists, she's a physical entity. But ownership, price, exchange, these are socio-institutional constructs, and therefore these are normative. They can't be, physically detected. Now, Hunt says that social sciences necessarily involve social constructs, and those social constructs are not tangible in the same way like rocks or stones. But that doesn't mean that doesn't make them normative or untestable. HST are just imposing a physicalist standard, and that would destroy the social sciences if it is accepted, right? Uh, so, uh, so normativity is about evaluation or prescription art. It is not about whether concept is socially constructed or value laden. So, Hunt says that HST's claim that marketing is overwhelmingly, a normative and should start anew. It is all resting on a very physicalist ontology, that which is an idea that only what is physically tangible or observable or measurable is real. So, and hence fit for the positive sciences. So, philosophy of science has already learned from the failure of logical positivism that if we just impose this physicalism, that would be in fact too restrictive for the sciences, like especially the social sciences, because it gives us an impoverished vocabulary. So, if you reject the non-physical entities, you simply lose the ability to talk scientifically about things like ownership or price or rights or exchange, things like norms or power or trust or roles, preferences, beliefs, expectations. These are not ghosts. These are just what social science must study. And Hunt proposes scientific realism as a better ontology. What is this? That entities need not be directly observable or tangible to exist. And long term success of theories gives reason to believe that their entities or structures are real. Okay, so this argument, this beautiful crafted argument, saves price or exchange or ownership from declared normative just because they are institutionally constructed. Okay. And but Hunt also agrees with HST on one principled point, that nothing in science should be immune from criticism. And Hunt rejects Imrine Lakatos ideas that research programs need a hard core that is beyond questioning. Hunt argues that even the foundational framework should be periodically tested and criticized, especially they are trusses holding up the discipline's conceptual structure. And this, in fact, reinforces what his earlier stance was of critical pluralism, that we should be open to multiple perspectives, but we should be ruthless about critique. Okay, so we have a clear verdict on HST and on the dichotomy now, that first of all, the context matters and the hidden normativity is real. So, 2 points are granted by Hunt. First, whether a sentence is positive or normative often requires examining the context, and some positive looking statements may hide normative statements. And this is, in fact, done very frequently and deliberately by the rhetoricians. Okay. Therefore, it is not enough that you simply look for the word should or ought before declaring something as normative or positivistic. But it doesn't destroy the dichotomy. Context sensitive classification is still possible. The second point is that the dichotomy is not it is not that it is too ambiguous to be useless. Okay, so normative statements are those that in context make judgments or evaluations or commands or prescriptions or imperatives. And positive statements, business is not that. Positive statements do not do that. Positive statements just describe, explain, or predict. And the dichotomy between is and ought has served clear thinking for hundreds of years, and it serves marketing well. Okay, and the HST arguments about starting new, they have germinated due to this skepticism has germinated due to inconsistent application of HST's own context matters insight. Okay, so because they violate their own idea about context mattering, and they just treat ownership, exchange, or price as inherently normative. And the second is HST have a very physicalist ontology, which is too restrictive. Physicalism should be rejected because it would in fact block progress in social sciences. So over the last decades, it has become very fashionable to claim social sciences is pernicious or it is misguided, and these cynical conclusions often have germinated from deconstructionism or postmodernism or constructivism or relativism or subjectivism. Uh, and this positive normative debate shows that we don't need to be mesmerized into skepticism. Some philosophical roads do lead to nihilism, sometimes intentionally or sometimes accidentally, right? Uh, so the model is a discipline wide map, right? So every discipline has a taxonomical framework, which might be explicit or implicit, that guides what the scholars think the discipline is about and what approaches are legitimate. Now, Hunt claims that his framework is very inclusive because it gives homes or blocks to the different tribes in marketing. Managerialists can just look for the positive micronormative block or cells. Broadeners can look for the people who want to broaden the scope of marketing, can for example Kotler and Sidney Levy in 1970s, they can look for the non-profit side. And the people who want to explore the societal impact, they can go to the macro positive and macro normative side. And the marketing science people can look for the positive cells. So this dichotomy, you know this taxonomical framework is healing. It is not divisive. So it tries to stop the move, which some people claim that whatever we study is not marketing, whatever they study is only marketing. And the three dichotomies model has is analytically useful as well. It has already been used to analyze historical approaches like functional, institutional, commodity, managerial, environmental systems, uh, uh, school of thoughts, the broadening debate, and the debate also about the is marketing a science. And the three dichotomies model is very pedagogically sound as well, because students already know the terms like micro and macro from economics. Profit, non-profit is very easy. Positive, normative, this division requires some work, but it gives big benefits, right? Because many beginners wrongly have an idea about marketing, is that marketing is just ads plus selling. And the fourth point is that this three dichotomies model is conceptually very robust. So this has absorbed decades of critique with little damage. Time is the ultimate test, but whatever evidence we have up till now, we should have some optimism, right? Then we have a monograph plan that what the book is about. In chapter 2, we have marketing as a discipline, and we have philosophical foundations of marketing theory. We have some controversies in marketing, and towards the last, we have the resource advantage theory. So, and now let's see some of the questions and answers. They're also very important as far as the understanding goes. The first question, question essentially is that do the social sciences or marketing need a different methodology than the physical sciences? No, right? Because we have already seen that the methodology or the logic of justification is fundamentally the same, and what differs is the techniques. So methodology is how we justify or validate claims or accept, reject hypotheses or theories, and techniques are the tools like surveys or experiments, instruments, and different fields obviously use the different tools, but that does not imply a different scientific method. Then why do many social scientists claim that they need a different methodology? Because they often confuse techniques with methodology, or they also confuse the context of discovery with the context of justification. Okay. Second question is about this lasers abstraction versus realization. That is, are there different methodologies? And then we have a question about discovery or justification, deductive, inductive, and then at last about usefulness. So lasers two model building routes are, these are not two different methodologies in Hunt's sense. They are just different ways of generating and refining models, and they are mostly about discovery and iterative development, and but evaluation of models is justification, right? So these fit in abstraction because they start from the observed situations, they recognize relationships, they quantify, formalize, and it is more towards the inductive side. And then it also fits in the realization because they start from the theory or abstract statements, then we have a consistent set, then we move on to an abstract model, we check the congruency with the real situation, and this is more deductive, this realization. And what about the usefulness of models? So models are useful because they force clarity, they allow the derivation of implications, and they can support prediction or explanation once they are tested. And which one is superior for marketing? So neither one is universally superior. Marketing benefits from both abstraction, that is, abstraction is very beneficial when we have rich data and we want structure, and realization is powerful when the theory is strong and what we are looking for is a disciplined application or testing. So the real scientific question is that how well the model's applications hold up under the intersubjective checking the evidence or tests. The third question is about marketing research versus market research, publishability, and would the practitioners or academics read the only marketing research journals, or is the marketing research impractical? So in a scholarly way, the marketing research aims to expand general knowledge about marketing, while the market research just aims to solve a particular specific firm's problem. Hunt's litmus test here is how to distinguish between marketing research and market research. Hunt gives a very simple litmus test. That what we what will we know now about marketing in general, which we didn't know earlier? Okay, if we can know something more, that is marketing research, right? If we can't, that is market research. But both can be publishable. Marketing research is by definition publishable because it targets the generalizable knowledge. Market research is publishable only if it yields some generalizable insight. For instance, a boundary condition or method or theory or some general mechanism. Otherwise, it is just a report made for the client. Now, would practitioners enjoy a journal exclusively of market research? So, yes, of course, usually more than academics would because it's immediately actionable, but often not generalizable. Academics would likely find it very thin on contribution to the theory or contribution to the knowledge. Is marketing research impractical? No, that is false dichotomy. The good theory which can explain or predict is practically valuable. Now, the fourth question is about the JMR papers. The fact that JMR papers are micro profit normative, and they are very quantitatively sophisticated, y- but still they are criticized as too scientific. Is this a contradiction? And is management science or marketing management or accounting a science? Now, the answer to this is not strictly contradictory, right? So, too scientific when we complain about a thing, we that is mostly a complaint about overemphasis on the technique or formalism, for instance, math or estimation or sophistication. But that is not a complaint about the subjective marketing understanding. Something can be very quantitative and still can be criticized for being too scientific, strictly too method driven or too narrow. And if a body of work is largely normative, then by Hunt's logic, it is not a science in the strict sense, because science explains or predicts what is a positive phenomena. Normative work can be important, but it's a different cell. Now, is management science a science? Management science contains normative optimization, right? Because what decision rule should you use? It also has some positive components, some empirically testable claims about systems. So parts can be scientific, parts are just prescriptive engineering like. Is marketing management a science? Yes, because much of marketing management is, not much, but some of it is still in the positive dimensions, that it can be science if it is there in those dimensions. But it is also a fact that much of the marketing management is micronormative, right? So micronormative is not a science, but if it falls into any of the positive cells, then it is a science. Is accounting a science? So accounting practice is often normative or technical, but accounting research can be positive and scientific, right? So then the fifth question is about some topics sitting in multiple cells. So yes, some topics can sit in multiple cells because the same phenomenon can be studied descriptively or prescriptively. That is, the same phenomenon can be studied through a positive lens or a normative lens, and the micro macro can depend upon the level or criterion used. So if we can't classify a chapter or a paper or an article cleanly, so do some disciplined theory work. We should identify what dimension is misfitting. Okay, profit, non-profit, micro, macro, positive, normative, and then we should propose a modification that improves the inclusiveness, and it improves inclusiveness without destroying the distinction. Now, the sixth question is about the optimal combination of cells topics for different courses and what criteria. This is about the curriculum design argument. So, basic marketing course should, of course, have a broad coverage across the cells. The intention of this should be to correct the myth that marketing is just equal to selling plus ads. Okay, we should also include the micro, macro, and positive normative breadth. In a marketing management course, we should emphasize the profit micro normative cell plus enough of cell 1. Okay, that is profit micro positive, positive buyer or firm behavior to justify those prescriptions. In a marketing research course, there should be a heavy emphasis on the positive questions and how justification works, how the market research examples can appear, but it should be framed as a generalizable knowledge production. Okay, because market research need not be always generalizable, but for a marketing research course, if you are using the market research examples, it should be framed as a generalizable knowledge production. In MBA courses, the tilt should be more on the micronormative and decision contexts, but it should have some macro non-profit exposure for scope realism as well. And the PhD courses should be very philosophy, method, or theory building, and they should have some multi cell scope also, because researchers must know what kind of claims they are making and how to justify them. And what is the criteria for optimality then? The criteria is that we should match the learning objectives, managerial action versus scientific explanation. We should represent the discipline scope and ensure that the students can distinguish positive versus normative and discovery versus justification. The seventh question is that why should we distinguish discovery from justification? Are the discovery processes different in marketing versus physical sciences? Should they be? So why is it important? Because we can use many creative routes to generate idea. We have already seen many of them earlier, dreams and calculate, but we still need different discipline standards to test or validate claims, that is justification. Confusing them leads to very bogus multiple scientific methods conclusions. Are the discovery processes different? So discovery process can differ in the techniques and the typical settings, but there is no single logic of discovery, so it's not very special to marketing. And should they be different? So we need not have any special exemption. Whatever is our discovery route, however you discover your hypothesis and all that is a different matter. It can be by serendipity, it can be through dreams, it can be through anything. But the claims still face justification by evidence checks and criticisms. Now, why is marketing a science, this debate important, and what are the implications of this? So marketing a science, this debate is important because the implications of this, it matters because is this defect this debate affects, first of all, it affects what kind of questions are legitimized, a positive explanation versus positive prescriptive advice. It also influences how marketing is taught, whether as a narrow managerialism perspective or with a discipline wide scope. What are the journal standards and what are the expectations from the practitioners? So, if marketing is defined as a purely profit micronormative, then it cannot be a science. Marketing, in fact, becomes a marketing science because when it includes the positive dimensions and adopts the scientific method, that is the logic of discovery. Then why is the broadening the scope of marketing important, and what are the implications? Then because defining or broadening marketing changes the scope of what counts as marketing, non-profit, macro, societal, so which affects the same areas as whatever was there in the question 8, that what research is legitimate, what is taught, what journals publish, and what do practitioners thinks marketing is for. Then we have a beautiful question on grounded theory. First of all, is grounded theory strictly inductive? No, right? Because every grounded theory so starts with a problem. It has a focus, it has questions, and it has iterative comparisons. This already struggles in. It already brings in some structure. And we have seen that earlier in the chapter, that strict inductivism is untenable because relevance requires some a priori hypothesis or explanation, even if they are crude. Then we have a thing about theoretically sensitive versus preconceived theory. So, theoretical sensitivity is the familiarity that helps you notice subtle patterns, ask better questions, or sample intelligently without forcing data to fit a rigid template. And the preconceived theory, as warned, is a theory that dictates relevancies in advance, and it does it so strongly that it closes off emergence and makes the study confirmatory by design. Then C part, if someone claims no preconceived theory, but theoretically sensitive, now is it self deception? Hunt would probably say yes to this, right? Humans, they carry certain priors. Now, the real issue is whether you discipline them through reflexivity, constant comparison, or negative cases, rather than pretending that you have none of those. So, even if the empathy or imaginative identification helps us guess hypothesis, it is logically irrelevant to whether the hypothesis is true, because truth still needs objective evidence or justification. The D part is that, has the grounded theory been fruitful? Has it been significant, or has it resulted in some well confirmed theories? To this, Hunt says that as a discovery strategy, grounded theory has been good because it has generated concepts and mid range theory in some of the under theorized domains, right? But saying that it is well confirmed depends on justification, because the grounded theory outputs still need corroboration, triangulation, or replication, and strong evidential support to count as well confirmed. Because just discovery doesn't equate to validation. Then in question 11 we have an evaluation of Bartel's meta theory about logic of discovery. Should it be evaluated entirely in discovery, and which statements are normative or positive? So Bartel had proposed 7 axioms for marketing meta theory. So first question is it a logic of discovery? Mostly yes. Okay, these axioms are just guidelines for constructing theory. They are heuristic framework for how to build the marketing theory. They start with a concept of subject matter. They have derive some basic concepts. They subdivide concepts. They posit different or dependent or independent relations. They seek generality. They accept diversity. They aim for unification. Now that is discovery oriented because it tells us how to proceed in theorizing, but they don't tell us how to validate theory by evidence. Now it's not a strict logic in the strong sense. So there is no single logic of discovery that guarantees success. So the axioms by Bartel are heuristics. They are not a proof producing logic. Second is, should it be evaluated entirely in the context of discovery? The answer to this is also no, because even the discovery heuristics can be judged partly by their downstream consequences. Do these heuristics encourage theories that are testable? Do these heuristics push the theorist towards the law like generalizations and explanatory structures? Do these heuristics prevent premature closure, or do they create it? So, these heuristics should be evaluated as discovery guidance, but also ask whether, if we follow them, does that make the theories more or less amenable to justification, that is, test evidence or corroboration. Then the third part is that which axioms are normative versus positive. Now, axioms are just these axioms are meta theoretical prescriptions about how theory should be built. So most are normative, right? They are similar to the ought claims. So let's classify them. So first is theory proceeds from a concept of its subject and should be consistent with it. Should be consistent, so it's normative. Theory is built upon basic concepts derived from the concept of the subject and from related disciplines. Normative, because it tells the theorists what they should do. By subdivision of basic concepts, their range and qualities may be shown. This is mixed, right? Because may be shown is descriptive of a possibility. So it is kind of positive-ish, but as an axiom, it functions normatively. That is, it is a recommended practice. Then concepts in independent relationships are the basis for explanation or prediction. This is mostly positive or meta-theoretical because this is a claim about what explanation prediction requires, a descriptive claim about theory structure, but it can function normatively as a advice. That is, we should base our theory on the dependent independent relationships. Then theory is valid to the degree that those relationships have generality. Now this is mixed again, because valid to a degree is a claim about what validity consists in, but again, it can be used normatively when we say that we should seek generality and all that. The F is, as theory bears the mark of the marketing theorist, individuality and diversity are the normal characteristics. This is mostly positive because this is a descriptive claim about why diversity happens, but also has got a normative overtone because it is when we say that diversity are normal characteristics, so the normative undertone being that diversity is acceptable or normal. Then a G is that all the theories should be impressible in a general theory. Now, this is normative because should be impressible. This is an ideal, right? So, bottom line is that Bartels is proposing a normative meta theory about how the theory should be constructed, with some embedded positive claims about what explanation or prediction or validity typically involve. Question number 12 is about marketing as an art or science. So, this is a funny claim that marketing people are neither good artists nor good scientists. So, great scientists are great artists. We have to evaluate. So, what is science and define science? So Hunt says that science is characterized by a subject matter a description or classification, a presupposition of regularities or causal structures, and a scientific method as a logic of justification. What is art then? So art has two different meanings. First is art as fine art. So that involves expression, creation, aesthetic judgment, or interpretation. Then we also have art as skilled practice or craft, such as the art of medicine, or the practical know-how, or the applied judgment under uncertainty, or that some of the tacit skills. So if we say that now, of course, when we say marketing is an art, we mean in the not as an a fine art, but as a skilled practice or craft. So when we say marketing is an art, not a science. So yes, if you're defining marketing as profit micronormative, that is just decision, managerial decision making, then it is an art or craft, because it is about deciding what should be done. Okay, so Hunt does accept that under this normal narrow scope, marketing is not a proper science. But marketing as a discipline also includes the positive domains like consumer behavior or marketing systems or distribution systems, these which can be studied scientifically. So that claim is true only under a narrow definition. Then we have a very polemical jab that marketing people are neither good artists nor good scientists. So many marketers do prescription without sound profit positive knowledge, or do technique heavy work without substantial insights. So Hunt's framework would, agree that this is a real risk when people conflate scientific with quantitative sophistication and managerial relevance with normative claims which are unsupported by the positive explanation. So then, right, so might happen. This claim is not entirely bogus, but it applies to, of course, a certain kind of people only. Then we have also great scientists are also great artists. Genius emanates from great care. So this is plausible, of course, if artist means that the person has creativity in discovery, imaginative leaps and metaphor recognition and all that. And also he or she brings in craftsmanship in building the coherent theories. Now, Hunt agrees that discovery can involve eureka moments or metaphor, and insists that justification requires rigor. Great science often combines creative discovery with disciplined justification, and this can resemble artistry. The 13th question is about scientific progress requiring. Uh, 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 the 13th question says that scientific progress requires asking important questions. Uh, Evaluate. We have to evaluate this. How to separate the important versus unimportant? Are the consumer behavior channels asking important questions? And then can trivial become important? So we have to evaluate the claim. So this claim is partially right, because even the perfect validation methods can't rescue a trivial question, but it is also overstated because science progresses through careful work on small questions that later become the building blocks. So, how to judge the importance, the practical criteria? So, a question is important if it targets some major phenomena like large scope or high frequency or high impact. It addresses a theoretical, obstruction or theoretical bottleneck, a missing mechanism, let's say, or contradiction, or it resolves a policy, managerial, societal dilemma, macro normative relevance, or it if it unlocks new methods or measures which others can use, right? Which is about how to judge a question as important. Now, the third part of the question is, are consumer behavior and channels important? So now both can be important, right? Consumer behavior is core to transaction. It is often important when it reveals the mechanisms, and not only when it shows, and not when it shows small effects in the narrow lab context. And channels can, of course, also be deeply important because it is concerned with power efficiency, platform governance, welfare. Okay. So, can the trivial become important? Yes. Small empirical puzzles can become, very important if the technology changes or the institutional context changes. Or let's say the thing which we're dismissing as a minor parameter, it later it turns out to be a very critical boundary condition. So importance is partly context relative, right? The 14th question is, if science is knowledge from observation, then painting is a science because it's based on observation. We have to evaluate. Now, this is a category mistake. Painting uses observation, but science is not only observation, right? Science requires intersubjective testable implications. Science requires systematic justification rules. And science also requires theories or laws aiming at explanation or prediction. So, the goal of painting is not to reduce explanatory or predictive law like knowledge. Painting is expressive or aesthetic, but painting can incorporate optics, chemistry of pigments. Those agree, those parts can be scientific. So observation is necessary for many activities, but that alone is not necessary to make a thing science, right? That is not sufficient for science. We also need to have intersubjective testable implications, systematic justification rules, and the theories, laws which are aimed at explanation or prediction. The question 15 is about Myers, Kraser, and Massey's lack of problem oriented research, right? So that uh, percentage we can get into later when we read it, but what influences what academicians pursue? So journal incentives or tenure or data access or time horizon or the ideology of the reviewer or the funding availability or the training, right? And which what encourages problem oriented research? So industry partnerships and accessible field data, journals valuing relevance and problem phenomena based research, if there are rewards for replication, robustness, and implementation, and there is a doctoral training that also values values both the macro and managerial problems. What discourages then? First of all, the thing that discourages is the overemphasis on technique or narrow theory gaps. There are also some safe lab paradigms that are easier to publish, which also discourage problem orientation. There are some IP restrictions or confidentiality restrictions also. Then we have some review cultures which are hostile to context rich applied work, right? So again, we go back to 100. Market research, which is client problem solving, isn't automatically marketing research unless it yields actionable knowledge. So problem oriented needs to be framed in such a way that it contributes to general understanding as well. The question 16 is about says that studying exchange is economics, not marketing. That's the whole purpose of supply and demand. We have to evaluate this claim. So economics and marketing do overlap, but marketing still can have a distinct subject matter, right? We have seen the physics and chemistry analogy in the chapter. Uh, Marketing makes the transaction or exchange as its focal phenomena, but economics' focal point is the allocation of scarce resources, and exchange is just a tool within that broader allocation framework. And studies exchange. Marketing studies exchange in ways that economics just abstracts away, right? Marketing also studies relationships, institutions, trust, persuasion, meaning, channels. Marketing also studies the non-price mechanisms. It also studies the co-creation network and service system. So it's not that the exchange is owned by economics, right? Marketing also has some areas which are its. Then question 17 is about the five guidelines by Wells, and we have to say which are discovery and which are justification. We have to classify each. So leave home. So the which are essentially it is a point about studying the bigger decisions. This is mostly discovery, right? It is about what to investigate. Second is forsake methodology, which is abandoning the bad assumptions. This is mixed, but it is still largely justification because it targets the inferential errors. Errors like students are not consumers, which is external valid, which gives external validity problems. Lab is not environment, because if you equate lab to environment, that gives you a problem of ecological validity. Statistical significance is not the same as substantive significance, because again, if you do that, it causes interpretation problems. Correlation is not causation, and limitations don't magically disappear, which is honest inference. And these are about how evidence justifies claims, right? The third is reach out. That is, we should involve the business, government, other disciplines. This is mostly discovery, because this is about access to phenomena, richer framing, which can just support justification through better data and triangulation. And fourth one is start small, stay real, and then ask, so what? This is also discovery. right? Because this is pertaining to the scope or aim of theory. But if we say that stay real, this also hints at justification. That is, whatever you are claiming should fit with reality. Then fifth is research backwards. That is, if I find X, who cares, right? So this is also discovery, because this affects what questions we select, what questions we go after. But it can also improve justification by forcing clearer implications, right? So Hunt would probably agree with most, but he would caution that we should not confuse relevance with normativity only. Positive research can also be valuable, even though it might not be of any immediate prescription benefits. So this is where Hunt, explicitly disagrees with the Robbins barren unless prescriptive stance. The 18th question is about, is science marketing versus is science like marketing in many respect? Is the alternative metaphorical questions, and what about its effectiveness? So is science marketing? This question is a very metaphorical question. It asserts an identity that X is Y, that is false but can be heuristically rich. Is science like marketing? Is many respect is not we know from literature, right? The first one, we are not saying a thing like, so that is metaphor, the first one. But when we say is science like marketing in many respect, is not a metaphor in a strict sense. This one is a simile, right? So, all those literature figures of speech we know. So it's an analogy or simile that weakens the shock value and interpretive leap. So, would the alternative be as effective? So, probably less effective rhetorically, because metaphor forces attention, and it invites the transfer of ontology concepts values. But it may be more precise and less likely to be misunderstood. So, metaphor is a very strong discovery catalyst. So it prompts more justification, it brings more creativity, probably helps in serendipity. And simile is safer, but it is also duller. Question 19th is that argue metaphors also bring in justification and counter argue, then which is superior. So we can give some arguments for metaphors in justification, that metaphors function as explanatory models. For example, if we write markets as conversations, it might guide what evidence to seek and how to interpret the mechanisms. Then in the complex systems, metaphors can be indispensable for understanding and not just discovery. And the fact is, some metaphors also generate testable implications. So that is the case, metaphors participate in the justification indirectly, right? And the counter arguments here are stronger, right? Counter arguments are, metaphors are not just truth evaluable in the way scientific claims are. For example, if we say marketing is war, that is a metaphor, but that is not strictly true or false in the required sense. Second is argument is that, second counter argument, that metaphors, against the metaphors usage in logic of justification, that justification requires intersubjective tests of implications, and metaphors can inspire implications, but evidence supports the derived hypothesis. Evidence does not support the metaphor itself. So through metaphor you can have a derived hypothesis, and the evidence would support that derived hypothesis. Evidence won't support the metaphor itself, right? And third is that metaphors can mislead by importing inappropriate ontology or values. For example, marketing is war, so might might be commonsensical or might not be commonsensical, right? Not every marketing can be war. So we are just equating two different words. So it might be the case that we are importing inappropriate ontology or values, which is superior then. So in this side, obviously the counter arguments are superior, because metaphors primarily are discovery tools, and justification is about the evidence for the specific propositions derived from them. So, but we can take a middle ground, that metaphors can be useful in the justificatory rhetoric, that it can communicate why an explanation fits, even if they themselves are the evidential basis, even if they themselves are not the evidential basis. And the question 20 is about what is the relevance of the Epictetus quotation, that, how would you know it was a good proof? So what is the relevance to chapter 1? So the fact is that before we argue about what the scope of marketing is and whether marketing is a science or which methods are legitimate, we still need standards for evaluating arguments and evidence. And that is what, the chapter 1 starts. That is, it starts the logic of proof and justification, why the method matters. So this, what the quote by Epictetus, that foreshadows everything, that we can't escape methodology. Uh, Even the person who dismisses the methodology is reliant on some implicit standard, right? So this finishes our discussion of chapter 1.